1956-ban megvolt az egység, megvolt a közös akarat, de az erő nem volt elegendő a szuverén cselekvésre.
In today's video, we're going to talk about one of the most talked about figures in European politics, Viktor Orban, and how his latest moves are affecting the future of Hungary and the EU as a whole. You don't want to miss this, so let's dive right in. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay updated with everything happening in EU politics. Viktor Orban, Hungary's Prime Minister, has always been a controversial figure, but in the last few years he's become a central figure in the political drama that's unfolding across Europe. As we all know, the European Union is facing numerous challenges: rising nationalism, debates over migration, the future of the euro, and more. But one of the most significant issues within the EU right now is Hungary's ongoing clashes with Brussels over the rule of law, democratic principles, and national sovereignty. Orban's stance is often described as a challenge to the EU's fundamental values. He has been openly defiant of what he sees as the EU's overreach into Hungary's national affairs, particularly on issues like migration, media freedom, and the judiciary. While Orban presents himself as the champion of Hungarian sovereignty, critics argue that he is undermining the very democratic foundations that the EU was built on. The most recent developments show that Orban's government is not backing down. In fact, it seems like his influence is growing not just within Hungary, but across the EU as well. The rise of populist, nationalist movements throughout Europe has made Orban a leader to be reckoned with. His hardline stance on migration, his refusal to adhere to EU judicial reforms, and his attacks on the independent media have earned him both admiration from his supporters and condemnation from EU institutions. This is where things get really interesting, because Hungary's path could be a preview of what's to come for the EU in the future. Now, let's talk about one of the most pressing issues that Orban is at the center of right now: migration. In 2015, when the EU was grappling with the migrant crisis, Orban took a very firm stance. Hungary built a fence along its southern border to stop migrants from entering, and Orban has maintained that Hungary will not accept any migrants through EU-mandated quotas. This has caused constant tension between Budapest and Brussels. The European Commission has pushed Hungary to accept its fair share of refugees, but Orban has made it clear that he considers the issue of migration to be a matter of national sovereignty and security. Orban's argument is that Hungary, with its unique history and cultural identity, cannot afford to open its borders to migrants in the way that Western European countries like Germany and France have. He's not just opposing the EU's policies on migration, he's challenging the very idea that Brussels should have a say in Hungary's immigration policies. And here's the thing: Orban's message resonates with a large portion of the Hungarian population. He's built a narrative around the idea that Hungary is under threat from an influx of migrants, and that only he and his government can protect the country's borders and values. But here's where things get more complicated for the EU. Hungary's rejection of the EU's migration policies isn't just about Orban's personal views. It's part of a larger pattern of resistance to EU policies. Orban has also come under fire for his attempts to weaken Hungary's independent judiciary, his control over the media, and his growing influence over the country's political institutions. This has led to accusations that Hungary is moving away from democracy and toward authoritarianism, a process that's been described as illiberal democracy. The European Union, of course, has not been silent on this issue. The European Commission has initiated several legal proceedings against Hungary, arguing that Orban's government is undermining democratic values and violating EU laws. One of the tools at the EU's disposal is the Article 7 procedure, which can be used to suspend a member state's voting rights within the EU. This process has been triggered against Hungary on several occasions, but the challenge has been that Orban has found strong allies, particularly in countries like Poland, which also faces similar criticism for its judicial reforms. So, what's the EU's strategy in dealing with Orban's Hungary? The answer is, it's complicated. On one hand, the EU is trying to stand firm on its principles, but on the other hand, it can't afford to push Hungary too far, especially given the significant financial contributions Hungary receives from EU funds. The EU has made it clear that Hungary's stance on migration is not acceptable, but Orban has effectively used his position to rally support from other populist governments in Central and Eastern Europe. In fact, Hungary's nationalist policies are becoming a rallying point for other EU member states that feel the union is becoming too liberal and bureaucratic. As this conflict continues, Orban's grip on power in Hungary only seems to be strengthening. In the most recent elections, his party, Fidesz, won by a significant margin, securing him a fourth consecutive term as Prime Minister. Orban's ability to maintain power, despite EU opposition, has left many wondering whether the EU can really enforce its values, or if Hungary's path toward illiberalism could set a dangerous precedent for other member states. The situation with Orban and Hungary also highlights a broader problem for the EU. How does it maintain unity in the face of rising nationalism and populism? Many countries in the EU are grappling with growing anti-establishment sentiment, and leaders like Orban are tapping into that discontent. The rise of right-wing populist movements in Italy, Poland, France, and even Sweden shows that Hungary is not an isolated case. In fact, Orban has formed alliances with other right-wing leaders across Europe, creating a bloc of countries that share similar anti-EU and anti-liberal agendas. This has the potential to significantly shift the balance of power within the EU in the coming years. For the EU, the question now is whether it can stay united in the face of these rising challenges. Will it remain a union that champions democratic values, the rule of law, and human rights? Or will the EU gradually shift towards a more decentralized structure, where member states have more autonomy to pursue their own interests, even at the expense of EU unity? These are crucial questions for the future of Europe, and what's at stake is nothing less than the very identity of the EU itself. If Orban continues to push back against EU policies with the support of other populist leaders, it could lead to a reshaping of the European project. Hungary's challenge to the EU's values could be the beginning of a larger trend, one that will fundamentally change the way Europe operates. Now, before we dive into what all of this means for the future of the EU, if you're enjoying the video so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stay updated with everything happening in European politics. We're just getting started, and there's a lot more to talk about. So, what comes next for Hungary and the EU? The situation is far from resolved. In fact, it's only becoming more complex. Orban's defiance of Brussels is likely to continue, and the EU will need to decide how to respond. Will the Union crack down harder on Hungary and risk pushing it further away, or will it try to maintain unity, even if that means compromising on its values? As things stand, Hungary's position in the EU is uncertain. Orban's government continues to assert its sovereignty while receiving significant financial support from the Union. The EU is in a tough spot, and it's clear that the situation is only going to escalate as Orban continues to challenge the core principles of the Union. And this brings us to a larger issue, the future of European integration. Is the EU capable of adapting to the rise of populism and nationalism, or will it have to rethink its structure entirely? This is something that we'll be watching closely in the coming months and years. Before we end, don't forget to subscribe to EU Politics for more in-depth analysis of the latest developments in European politics. The future of the EU is being shaped right now, and we'll be here to keep you informed every step of the way. Thanks for watching, and let us know in the comments. How do you think the EU should handle Hungary's challenge to its values? Do you think Viktor Orban is simply standing up for Hungary's sovereignty, or is he undermining the democratic foundation of the EU? Let's discuss.